At 49, Connie Johnson was told she had late-stage breast cancer. The words fell like stones into an ocean that had already begun to drown her. The doctor's voice was calm, professional, the kind used to deliver bad news without emotion. But all Connie could hear was the low hum of the air conditioner, the ticking of the clock on the wall, and the faint vibration of her phone in her handbag. Life, stubborn and ordinary, went on outside that room even as hers began to end. When she finally left the hospital that day, the city looked the same. Same traffic, same faces, same restless rush, yet everything had shifted. The sky seemed thinner, the air heavier. She had always believed that tragedy would arrive with thunder or fire, but it came quietly, disguised as a doctor with kind eyes and a clipboard. Daniel, her husband of 25 years, took the news with detached politeness. He didn't even bother to hide his relief when he learned the cancer was terminal. He simply sighed as if a long and uncomfortable obligation had finally reached its expiry. Days later, while Connie was still processing her diagnosis, he told her there was something she deserved to know. "I can't keep lying anymore," he had said over dinner, the words mechanical, the expression empty. "I've always loved Melissa. She was the one before you. I only married you because life took a turn. But now I think I should make things right." Make things right. The phrase looped in Connie's mind for days, simple, cruel, unforgivable. Melissa Grant. The name alone made her stomach twist. The first love, the one who had left him for money and now, years later, had reappeared with a smile and perfect timing right when Connie was too weak to fight. The betrayal might have been bearable if it had ended there. But it didn't. Emma, her only daughter, had known all along. At 23, Emma Johnson was everything social media adored. Luminous, confident, and untouchable. 8 million followers hung on her every beauty tip and sponsored post. To the world, she was the picture of modern success. To Connie, she was the heartbeat that had made all her sacrifices worth it. Until she wasn't. When Connie confronted her, Emma rolled her eyes. "Mum, you're overreacting. Melissa makes Dad happy. She's classy, beautiful, and elegant. People adore her. You don't have to make this ugly." Ugly. That was the word her daughter used as if Connie's suffering were some kind of inconvenience that clashed with the family's brand image. In the weeks that followed, Daniel and Melissa became inseparable. He began bringing her to hospital visits, claiming it was good for everyone to get along. Emma joined them, laughing at Melissa's jokes, filming little snippets for her vlogs, always careful to crop Connie out of the frame. By the time Connie's hair began to fall, her place in the family had already been filled. They started using Melissa's name at home. "Melissa knows a specialist. Melissa booked the restaurant. Melissa thinks the house should be redecorated." When the doctors told her the treatments were no longer working, Connie didn't cry. She simply nodded and asked to go home. Her world had grown very quiet. In her final week, she stopped answering calls. The nurses noticed that she rarely looked at the TV anymore. She spent her hours gazing out the window, fingers resting on the ring Daniel had once placed on her hand, the same ring he now admired on Melissa's finger in public. The betrayal didn't feel like a wound anymore. It was a slow freezing, a hollowing from within. On her last night, she woke to voices outside her hospital room. Daniel's low tone, Melissa's soft laugh, Emma's cheerful hum, the sound of a happy family just down the hall. Her family. Without her. Connie closed her eyes and exhaled. The beeping beside her slowed, then stopped. Silence folded around her like velvet. The hospital dissolved into nothing. For a moment there was only darkness. Then a breath. Her own breath. The scent of roses. The weight of fabric on her skin. When Connie opened her eyes, she wasn't lying in a hospital bed. She was standing in front of a mirror, vibrant, healthy, alive. Her reflection was impossibly young. Her hair shone, her skin glowed, her eyes burned with color and strength she hadn't seen in years. The world around her glittered with candlelight and soft music. She was wearing a gown. Her engagement gown. The one she had worn the day Daniel proposed, the day she had once believed in forever. Her knees nearly gave out. It took her a full minute to realize where and when she was. The taste of shock was sharp on her tongue. Around her, the world hummed with celebration. Guests murmured, laughter floated through the air and glasses clinked. The same engagement party that had once begun her lifetime of heartbreak was happening again. But this time Connie knew how it would end. She pressed her palm to her chest, feeling her heartbeat fierce, insistent, real. She had died. He was sure of that. Yet here she was, alive, standing on the threshold of the same moment that had sealed her fate. The universe, in its cruel mercy, had rewound the clock. And Connie understood with absolute clarity what she had been given. Not forgiveness. Not peace. A second chance to burn everything that had once destroyed her. A slow smile curved her lips. She looked down at the engagement ring on her finger, the one Daniel had once given her, the one Melissa would one day steal, and thought, how poetic. Everything that had killed her had started with this ring. Now it would be where her revenge began. When the officiant stepped forward and invited the couple to exchange vows, Connie didn't move. The chatter faded, replaced by a tense hush. All eyes turned to her. Daniel smiled, the same charming smile that had fooled her for decades. But she saw it now for what it was, a mask stretched thin over vanity. She took the microphone from the officiant, the diamond on her finger catching the light. Her voice was steady, cold, and utterly calm as she told the crowd that the engagement was over. Gasps rippled through the hall. Daniel's face stiffened, confusion flickering into anger. But Connie was no longer the dying woman begging for kindness. She was the woman who had already been to hell and come back to light the match. The silence that followed Connie's announcement was the kind that pressed on the skin, heavy, suffocating, absolute. For a moment nobody moved. The music faltered. Champagne glasses trembled in frozen hands. Then came the whispers, first soft, then louder, rippling across the ballroom like a storm breaking through glass. Daniel Johnson blinked, his confident mask cracking. "What are you talking about?" he asked, the charm gone from his voice, replaced by panic. "Connie, this isn't funny." She looked at him, really looked at him, and felt the smallest flicker of pity. Not for the man he was, but for the man she had once believed him to be. 7 years she had spent at his side, building the company they shared. 7 years of handling clients, smoothing his failures, sacrificing her own ambitions just to keep his alive. And this was the man who would one day watch her die without flinching. Connie smiled slowly, deliberately, mercilessly. "You're right, Daniel. It's not funny. It's tragic." Gasps spread through the room. Someone near the back let out a shocked laugh, unable to tell if she was serious. Daniel's jaw tightened. "We can talk about this later," he muttered under his breath, his hand twitching toward her arm, the same possessive gesture that had once meant affection, now only control. Connie stepped back. "No, Daniel. We'll talk now. Everyone should hear this." And then she turned toward the grand entrance of the ballroom. "Isn't that right, Melissa?" Every head swung toward the doorway. Melissa Grant stood there in an elegant ivory dress, her expression frozen halfway between guilt and defiance. For a second she looked ready to flee, then Daniel's stunned whisper escaped him like a confession. "Melissa." The guests erupted in murmurs. Connie folded her hands in front of her, serene. "You don't need to hide, Melissa. After all, Daniel has always loved you. Why pretend otherwise?" Melissa's eyes darted from Connie to Daniel, calculating her next move. Then she gave a small, trembling smile, the same kind that had once fooled half the world. "Daniel and we were together a long time ago. I never meant to come between." "Oh, please." Connie's tone was razor smooth. "You've been coming between people your entire life. Don't stop now." A murmur of laughter rippled through the audience. Daniel's face turned red. "Enough," he snapped. "This isn't the time or the place." "It's exactly the time," Connie said softly. "Because this is where you plan to humiliate me, isn't it? Just like before." He frowned, confused. Of course he was. He didn't remember yet, not the way she did. But she remembered everything. In another life, this night had ended in tears, her tears, while he left the party to take Melissa home. And weeks later he had divorced her for good. The memory was branded into her like a scar. Not this time. Daniel opened his mouth, but the commotion at the entrance drew everyone's attention again. A small boy had wandered in, clutching a balloon. His little suit was wrinkled, his shoes too big. He ran up to Melissa, tugging her hand. "Mom, you said we found my dad. Is that him?" He pointed at Daniel with wide, innocent eyes. The air in the room turned electric. Daniel's parents, seated near the front, gasped. His mother's face drained of color. His father, on the other hand, straightened, eyes gleaming. "A grandson," he barked, delighted. "Daniel, is this true?" Connie felt the corners of her mouth lift, not in amusement but in something colder. How predictable, how disgustingly predictable that greed would replace decency in a heartbeat. Daniel stammered. Melissa wept prettily. The audience swooned. And the lie took shape before Connie's eyes, polished and believable. She didn't interfere. He didn't need to. When Daniel finally turned to her, guilt flickering in his eyes, Connie only smiled. Don't worry, Daniel. She makes you happy, marry her. But when you divide the company, don't forget who built it with you. The final words sliced through the air like glass. Then she turned, lifted her chin and walked out. The heavy doors swung shut behind her with the quiet finality of a judge's gavel. The next morning, newspapers exploded with headlines about the scandalous bride switch at one of the city's most prestigious engagements. Photos of Daniel, Melissa, and the child plastered the gossip pages. Connie's name was dragged into every line: the betrayed woman, the fallen socialite, the tragic figure. Exactly the way she wanted it. She spent the morning drinking coffee by the window, flipping through the papers with the faintest smile. Let them talk. Let them believe she was broken. No one ever expects ruin to plan its own resurrection. Before lunch, she paid a visit to the hotel that had hosted the engagement. The manager, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit, greeted her with excessive politeness. She explained that since she was no longer the bride, she would not be covering the remaining balance of the event. Then, in a voice as sweet as poison, she added that she'd appreciate a copy of the ballroom's surveillance footage for sentimental reasons. Money changed hands. Rules bent. Within 10 minutes, the footage was hers. That night, she watched it alone, the laughter, the betrayal, the moment Daniel's expression softened at the sight of Melissa. Over and over again she replayed it, memorizing every gesture, every lie, every ounce of arrogance. By the time she shut off the screen, her plan was beginning to take form. This time she wouldn't simply survive Daniel Johnson. She would dismantle him piece by piece. 3 days after the engagement disaster, Daniel Johnson walked into his office pretending life had returned to normal. The newspapers called him a man torn between two loves, painting him as some tragic romantic hero, while Melissa was hailed as the glamorous woman who'd won back her destiny. Connie read every article. Each word only sharpened her resolve. That morning she arrived at the company's glass tower dressed in a crisp white suit, the same shade as the flowers she had chosen for her engagement. She had worn mourning once, now she wore war. Employees stared as she strode through the lobby. Some lowered their eyes in shame, others whispered. Every step echoed through the marble like a drumbeat announcing judgment. When she entered the top-floor meeting room, Daniel was already there, laughing with his executives. Melissa sat beside him, legs crossed, basking in her borrowed power. The moment she saw Connie, her laughter died. "Connie," Daniel began, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "This is a surprise." "Not really," she replied. "I built half this company. It seems only fair I drop by." The room fell silent. The air thickened. Daniel gestured awkwardly for everyone to leave. One by one, his executives made excuses and vanished, eager to escape whatever was about to unfold. As soon as the door clicked shut, Melissa stood. "You have no right to be here," she snapped. Connie didn't even look at her. "Sit down, Melissa. Adults are speaking." Color drained from Melissa's face. Daniel exhaled through his nose. "What do you want, Connie?" She smiled faintly. "What's mine?" He laughed, short and brittle. "You can't be serious. After what you pulled at the engagement. You embarrassed us all." "You embarrassed yourself," she corrected softly. "I simply removed the mask." Melissa let out a cold laugh. "You're pathetic. You didn't even pay for your own engagement. You made the hotel chase Daniel for the bill." Connie tilted her head. "Did he pay easily?" Melissa froze. "Because from what I've seen," Connie continued, sliding a USB drive across the table, "he nearly choked on the price." Daniel stiffened. "What is this?" "The footage," she said. "Of your engagement. The moment your mother slapped Melissa in front of your guests for costing her $58,000. The part where you stood there and did nothing." Melissa's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel's face darkened. "You wouldn't." "I would," Connie cut in. "And I already have copies." Silence fell. The hum of the air conditioner was the only sound between them. Daniel's voice dropped, tight with anger. What do you want? I want out, Connie said simply. Buy me out at fair market value. 1 million should cover it. You'll own this glass cage and I'll own my freedom. He sneered. You think you can demand terms from me? Connie reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. Within seconds, 6 men in black suits entered the room, professional security hired for the day. They stood behind her in perfect formation. Her smile never wavered. I don't demand. I negotiate. The color drained from his face. Melissa backed away from the table. Minutes later, Daniel made the transfer. $1 million blinked into Connie's account. The victory felt cleaner than any apology could ever have. She turned to leave. Behind her, Melissa's voice cracked. You're destroying him. You're heartless. Connie paused at the door, glancing back with quiet amusement. Melissa, my dear, you can't destroy what's already rotten. Then she walked out, heels clicking in rhythm with the steady pulse of her new life. That night, she returned to her family home, the one Daniel had always mocked as too old-fashioned. The scent of old wood and lavender met her like an embrace she hadn't realized she'd missed. Lucas was waiting for her. Her older brother had always carried himself like a man forged from discipline and exhaustion. When their parents died, he had sacrificed everything. His studies, his peace, and his youth to hold their world together. The moment she entered, he was already on his feet, his expression thunderous. You went through with that ridiculous engagement without telling me. Connie sighed. And then I cancelled it. Publicly. He stared at her. Of course you did. His tone was halfway between disbelief and reluctant admiration. Connie poured herself a glass of wine, her calm unnerving him. You don't have to worry about Daniel anymore. He's not part of my future. But I will make sure he pays for being part of my past. Lucas rubbed his temple. And how do you plan to do that? There's a tender coming up, she said. Nuray Industries. The biggest logistics and infrastructure project of the year. He's desperate to win it. It's his only chance to keep his company alive. And I'm going to make sure he doesn't. Her brother raised an eyebrow. You think you can take him down through business? I know I can, Connie replied. He thinks money is power. Let's see how he handles losing both. For the first time that evening, Lucas smiled. I missed this side of you. So did I, she said quietly. The plan was set in motion. The morning of the Nuray Industries tender broke sharp and golden. From her hotel balcony, Connie watched the city stretch awake, sunlight bouncing off the towers that had once felt unreachable. Today she wasn't their ornament anymore. She was their reckoning. Nuray's event occupied the Grand Imperial Hall downtown, a space built for deals that shaped economies. Executives in tailored suits filled the lobby, the air humming with ego and cologne. Every company in the logistics and construction sector had sent its best. And Daniel Johnson, predictably, arrived late enough to make an entrance. He wore his usual performance of confidence. An expensive watch, a new tie, and Melissa on his arm, radiant in coral silk. Cameras swiveled toward them. Connie smiled faintly. She had already arranged for those cameras to keep rolling. She entered with Lucas beside her. Lucas, towering and composed, carried the quiet authority of a man who never needed to raise his voice. Together they drew stares that whispered, "Who are they?" By the time the presentations began, Daniel was already posturing on stage, charming the evaluators, selling his company's vision with all the oily charisma that had once fooled her. Connie watched in silence, her fingers resting lightly on her tablet. She knew his pitch by heart. She had written half of it in her previous life. Word for word. He had stolen her work, her strategies, her diagrams, and still he thought he was untouchable. When his turn ended, polite applause followed. He bowed slightly, confident that his performance had landed. Then came the next proposals, each one more polished, more substantial, more innovative. At last it was Lucas's turn. Reed Corporation had partnered with a smaller firm to present a joint solution that made Daniel's offer look prehistoric. As Lucas spoke, his tone remained measured and calm, but his presence commanded the room. Then he stepped aside. Connie took the stage. There was a brief hush. Everyone knew who she was, the scorned fiancée, the woman who had vanished from the gossip columns right after her public humiliation. Her sudden appearance sent murmurs rippling across the audience. She began by outlining Reed Corporation's vision, precise and confident, dismantling every weak point in Daniel's proposal without once mentioning his name. Her voice was even, her smile polite. But every slide of her presentation was evidence of innovation, financial stability, and environmental foresight that New Ray's executives couldn't ignore. By the time she stepped down, Daniel's confident facade had cracked. He whispered furiously to Melissa, who sat pale and motionless. The results were announced an hour later. Reed Corporation had won the tender. Daniel's company was not even shortlisted. The crowd applauded, cameras flashed, and Connie felt a rush of quiet satisfaction. Not joy, not triumph, but a deep, settling calm. For once, justice didn't need to scream. It simply existed. As the room began to empty, Daniel stormed up to her. "You did this," he hissed, his voice trembling with outrage. Connie looked at him serene. "No, Daniel. You did this. I just let the world see who you really are." Before he could reply, a reporter called out, "Miss Johnson, is it true you're Lucas Reed's sister?" Connie smiled for the cameras. "It's true. Family is everything to me." A collective murmur swept through the hall. Every business rival, every investor, every opportunist present suddenly understood what that meant. The woman Daniel had once discarded was the sister of the very man who now controlled half the sector. Melissa swayed where she stood, her composure crumbling. Daniel's face drained of color. Connie leaned in slightly, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "You wanted power, Daniel. You wanted prestige. Well, congratulations, you're famous now." Then she turned away, leaving him standing in the glare of the cameras as security ushered reporters closer. Questions bombarded him about the failed tender, the alleged fraud in his proposal, and the whispered rumors of his affair. The headlines the next day were merciless. Reed Corporation triumphs, Daniel Johnson's company loses major contract. The ex-fiancé returns, Connie Johnson outshines former partner. Stockholders abandoned him overnight. Contracts evaporated. By week's end, Daniel's empire was bleeding money and pride. Connie didn't celebrate. Revenge wasn't sweet. It was steady, deliberate, and practical. She simply closed her laptop, took a sip of tea, and exhaled. The first part of her debt had been paid. By the end of the month, Daniel Johnson's company had withered. Investors ghosted him, suppliers demanded payment up front, and the once confident man now lived on the defensive. His board was crumbling, and Melissa Grant's presence, once his prize trophy, had become an expensive liability. Connie watched it all unfold from her office window, a soft smile playing at the corner of her lips. The view from the top had never looked clearer. She wasn't cruel for the sake of cruelty. She was methodical, surgical. Daniel was merely tasting the pain he'd served her, diluted, even merciful compared to the ruin she'd endured. But desperation breeds madness. When the tabloids grew tired of Daniel's financial collapse, Melissa found a new way to make herself relevant. A month later, headlines screamed again, "Melissa Grant expecting Daniel Johnson's child." The announcement hit social media like a virus. Glamorous photos of her with a hand on her flat stomach, Daniel behind her looking dazed but complicit. The captions read, "Love conquers scandal." Connie read the article during breakfast and nearly laughed. Of course, Melissa was pregnant or claimed to be. The timing was perfect, the manipulation textbook. Nothing sells redemption like a baby. Still, part of her admired the audacity. "She's learned well," Connie thought dryly. "Too bad she learned from me." Soon Melissa began appearing on talk shows, glowing under studio lights, talking about forgiveness and second chances. She described Daniel as a man misunderstood by the world and painted Connie as the bitter ex who couldn't move on. Public opinion, fickle as ever, began to shift. Sympathy flowed toward the new couple. Connie, in their narrative, became the villain again, the icy businesswoman too proud to let go. Lucas warned her not to watch, but she did anyway. Watching Melissa's televised smile felt like being forced to relive her own funeral. But she didn't look away. You don't win wars by blinking. Then one gray afternoon the storm hit. Connie was leaving her office when she heard shouting in the parking lot. Melissa was there, thinner, wilder, her eyes shining with fury. Paparazzi trailed behind her like hungry dogs. "You think you can destroy us?" Melissa screamed, pointing an accusatory finger. "You ruined Daniel's life and now you're trying to ruin mine." Connie froze. Cameras clicked like machine guns. She realized instantly that this was a performance. Melissa lunged. Connie stepped aside. The other woman tripped, fell hard, and a cry split the air. Blood darkened the pavement beneath her. The photographers gasped as Melissa clutched her stomach. She pushed me. Melissa howled. She killed my baby. Chaos exploded. The flashes intensified, questions screamed across the lot, sirens in the distance. Within an hour, Connie's name was trending worldwide. Connie Johnson kills topped every platform. The internet tore her apart with glee. Money makes monsters. She couldn't stand to see them happy. Arrest her. Evening newscasts replayed the same clip. Melissa writhing on the ground, reporters shouting, Connie standing still, expression unreadable. By nightfall, the police arrived at her office. Lucas was already there, arguing with the officers as they escorted her away for questioning. He demanded evidence, fairness, decency, but outrage doesn't wait for facts. The holding cell was cold, fluorescent, and much quieter than the world outside. Connie sat on the metal bench, her wrists unmarked but her dignity deliberately bruised. Across from her, a female officer regarded her with the awkward pity people reserve for those who've fallen from grace. "Do you have anyone to call?" the officer asked gently. "I already have," Connie replied, her voice steady. "My brother. And my lawyer. Both are faster than the press." By morning, Lucas arrived with 2 lawyers and a briefcase full of evidence. "They're charging you based on media pressure," he muttered, fury barely contained. "Not law." Connie simply asked, "Where's Daniel?" "Outside," Lucas said. "Playing the grieving father for the cameras." Of course he was. Later that afternoon, Daniel visited her cell under the guise of concern. He brought a thermos of soup and wore the same expression he'd worn at her hospital bed years ago, pity dressed up as kindness. "I didn't want this," he said. "Melissa's in the hospital, she's devastated. But I'll talk to her. I'll convince her to tell the truth." Connie looked at the soup, then at him. "Did you poison it or just season it with hypocrisy?" He flinched. "You're still angry. I understand. But if you just let this go, we could." She laughed quietly, hollowly. "Daniel, you're still the same fool. You think I'm cornered. You think I don't plan 3 steps ahead. But tell me, when you and Melissa staged your little tragedy, did you check all the cameras?" He hesitated. Connie leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "No." "Good." 2 days later, the world shifted again. Lucas released the full footage from Connie's car's dashcam. The video showed everything. Melissa lurking by the parking lot, the paparazzi she'd called herself, the deliberate stumble, the fake cry. And the blood prearranged with a hidden packet that burst on impact. Alongside the footage came medical reports confirming Melissa's pregnancy had already failed weeks before the incident. The supposed miscarriage had been biologically impossible. Within hours, public opinion flipped. The same commenters who had cursed Connie now demanded justice. Melissa Grant lies replaced Connie Johnson kills. Brands cut ties with Melissa. Sponsors withdrew. Her influencer career, the one she'd clung to as proof of her superiority, vanished overnight. Then came the leaks. Screenshots of messages between Melissa and Daniel plotting the scandal, their plans to corner Connie and use the sympathy wave. The betrayal was complete, recorded, undeniable. By the end of the week, Daniel's company collapsed. His remaining investors fled and creditors circled like vultures. Connie didn't celebrate. She simply watched the downfall unfold from her quiet living room, sipping tea as the city lights shimmered beyond her windows. Revenge wasn't about noise. It was about balance. And the scales were finally beautifully even. When pride is gone, fear takes its place. Daniel Johnson spent the weeks after the scandal hiding behind drawn curtains, avoiding every call that wasn't from his lawyer. Reporters camped outside his building, drones hovered above his gate, and each morning brought another headline about lawsuits and betrayal. He had no company, no investors, no reputation. Even Melissa had disappeared. For Connie, the silence was almost poetic. The world no longer buzzed with his name. It whispered it, low and pitiful, the way people mention something diseased. Then one evening in late autumn, as she left the office after a long day, she felt the air change. The parking lot lights flickered, shadows stretching across the asphalt. A shape moved near the stairwell, hesitant, familiar. Daniel. He looked like a ghost of himself. Unshaven, eyes rimmed red, wearing the same suit from his last press conference. His shoulders trembled as he stepped forward, clutching something behind his back. "Connie," he said. The voice was dry, cracked. "You ruined me." She didn't move. "No, Daniel. You ruined yourself." The knife flashed before she saw him lunge. Her body reacted first. Years of reflex and training took over. She twisted away, the blade grazing her arm. Pain seared her skin, sharp but distant. Then the sound of footsteps thundered from behind her guards, closing in. Daniel didn't even resist. They tackled him to the ground, the knife skidding across the concrete. The echo of his collapse lingered in the air like a closing door. Blood soaked the cuff of Connie's sleeve. She stared down at him, his face pressed against the ground, his breath ragged. "You still think violence makes you powerful," she said quietly. "It never did." The police arrived within minutes. The arrest was fast, routine. For the cameras waiting outside the gate, Daniel shouted her name like a curse. For Connie it was nothing more than noise. He was charged with assault and attempted murder, sentenced to 5 years in prison. During the trial he tried to reach her letters, calls and pleas through mutual acquaintances. Connie ignored them all. But when he requested one final meeting before sentencing, she agreed. Not out of mercy but closure. The prison's visitation rooms smelled of bleach and stale air. Daniel sat across the glass barrier, thinner, paler, stripped of every illusion. When he saw her, tears filled his eyes. "I remember everything," he said, voice shaking. "You were the only one who ever believed in me. I was blind. Please forgive me. I can't survive in there." Connie regarded him with quiet detachment. 5 years isn't death, Daniel. It's the exact measure of mercy you never gave me." He pressed his palms against the glass, desperate. "Please." She stood. "I didn't come to forgive you. I came to watch you end." And then she walked away. Melissa's story ended not with a scream but with a whisper. When Daniel went to prison, she fled with what little money he had left. 4 months she survived on interviews, sympathy and cheap brand deals. Eventually even pity grew bored of her. Then, as if fate wanted symmetry, she found her next disaster. A tabloid report appeared one morning. Melissa Grant linked to violent altercation. She had taken up with a small-time criminal, using him to track down Daniel after his release. The plan, as later revealed in court, was simple. Confront him, force him to sign over hidden assets, maybe leak a scandal for profit. It went wrong immediately. Neighbors heard shouting, then the thud of furniture, then silence. When police entered, Daniel was sprawled on the floor, his throat cut so deeply it barely held together. The apartment was a slaughterhouse. Melissa was arrested within hours. During the trial she said nothing, showed nothing, and accepted the death sentence with the same vanity she'd once used to pose for cameras. When the execution date was announced, Connie didn't attend. Some tragedies she believed should die unseen. Months later, the city carried on as if none of it had happened. The scandals faded, the headlines changed, and Connie's name returned to business pages instead of gossip columns. Reed Corporation expanded into new markets, its growth steady and precise. Lucas thrived again. The color had returned to his face. He told her once that peace felt almost unnatural after years of crisis. "Maybe now," he said one evening, "you can finally rest." Connie smiled over the rim of her teacup. "Rest is for the dead." He chuckled softly. "You scare me when you say things like that." "I scare a lot of people," she replied. "That's how I sleep well." The night outside their window shimmered with city light. For the first time in years, Connie didn't feel the ache of loss or the tremor of anger under her skin. What remained was quieter, a steadiness she had never known. She had died once, burned once, and built herself again from ash and memory. Now every breath felt like victory. She didn't need revenge anymore. She had balance. She had freedom. And that, she decided, was enough.